In this lesson, we're going to talk about the elements of art and the principles of design. First up, we're going to use these elements and principles so that we can chat about and also analyze design and the design work that we're going to see in our class. We want to think about the elements of art. These are things like color, line, shape, texture. Think of these as like the ingredients that you're going to use in your design toolkit. If you're a design major, chances are you've seen some of these already in your Creative Suite toolbar. And, this is just there for a reason. These are the tools that we use on the daily. With the principles of design, these are concepts like balance, contrast, unity, harmony, pattern. Think of these as the recipes that you're going to bring all of those ingredients together with. And together, the elements and principles, they're going to help you create work that not only looks great, but it also functions and communicates well. So it could be a logo, a website, a piece of packaging. The whole goal is to have everything make sense visually and to communicate what you or your client were trying to. For our elements of art, and I know this is a design class, but we use the elements of art within this because this is our building blocks. This is how we create either a work of art or a piece of design. This is line, shape, form, space, texture, color, and value. And what we're going to do is break these down one by one. Line. This is the building block, so to speak, of them all. This is the simplest form. It's just a path between 2 points. This is something we've been familiar with, even in math class, from point A to point B, and we put that segment in between those 2 points. In this case, in our example, it's that subway map, and our lines are actually going to help direct the viewer's attention, which is going to help them to follow routes, connections, know where to get on, know where to get off, where they need to head as a wayfinding point. And that's what we're doing also in our design work. We're trying to guide the viewer from point A to point B to point C and so on. So within the design, in this case, the poster, these lines can divide the space, and it's going to help create sections that organize the information and make it easier for the viewer to parse. If it's in web design, it could be a grid system. And the grid system is these invisible lines that give structure to any of our pages. And this helps to maintain a consistency and alignment throughout the site. So as we can tell, we can have actual lines or we can have implied lines like the grid. It might not be there, but we still get the sense of it. And the adjectives that we can use to correlate to a line, there's so many more than what I have here, but it's the basics, the thick, thin, dashed, dotted, short, long, zigzag, broken, parallel, perpendicular, bold, subtle, curved. All of these are words that you can use whenever you're working through analyzing a piece of design. These are words that you can refer to help describe what is happening in the piece. They can be bold, they can be subtle, they can be straight, rigid, dynamic, etc. And each of these line types are going to carry its own meaning and its own energy. So a thick, straight line might communicate stability or strength. And thin, flowing, this could be elegant or whimsical or a little bit more fun and friendly. And in design, the type of line that you choose can help shape how people perceive your work and your message. Example, straight lines, this is going to be our structure and order. Curved, it's going to feel a little bit more organic, natural, approachable. And those diagonal lines, this is going to be our movement, our energies, and a sense of action. And I will say there is an asterisk on our friend, the diagonal line. If they are done right, they are incredible. But if they're just a little bit off, they can actually take your eye off a composition, especially say, if it's a diagonal line with an arrow on the end. If it's pointing in towards a composition, it's going to keep you on the page. But if that diagonal, if it has an arrow on the end, it's going to take you off the page. So you have to be somewhat aware of what you're doing if you're working with a diagonal line. So how do you use these lines effectively in design? And what we want to do is just think about their purpose. Are you trying to lead the viewer's eye to a focal point? You're going to want something that's more of a strong and guiding line. If you're trying to go for some separation between the sections, Horizontal and vertical lines are going to be probably what you'll go with because it's not going to overwhelm the design. If you want to have some sort of emotion, like we were just saying with the curvy, where it has that sort of friendlier, whimsical approach to it, you might want something that's a little bit more organic and free-flowing to help align with whatever message it is that you're trying to convey. All right, we're going to go back to maps because a map is a really nice way to see like how lines and within that structure work. These aren't just about showing the routes. This is trying to simplify a really complex system into something that is visually digestible. And also, keyword here is, digestible quickly, because if you're trying to get from point A to point B while looking at this map, let's say everything on this map was in that light blue. That would make everything really hard to figure out, well, is it going from here to there, or where are these intersections? The color is going to help with these lines also because it's going to help the viewer's eye without adding extra info or extra unnecessary detail. It's going to help parse that info in a way that we can, again, easily digest and get to point A to point B with ease and efficiency. And that's the power of line within design. All right, from line to shape. And if we think about line, especially if it was, say, a figure drawing class, this is our quick gesture or contour drawing. And then we're going to build out that shape around the line. And this is essentially what's happening here also. So lines are akin to the skeleton of a design, and the shape would be akin to the body. So it's going to give it structure, and it's going to give it form and a little bit of meaning to your work. These can communicate ideas, evoke emotions, and they also could become the face of an entire brand, especially with, what we have here, our target bullseye. It's just simple shapes, but everyone, for the most part, can recognize what's happening in here. And the same thing with the Nike swoosh or the former Twitter bird. And all of these are essentially shapes. And there are different types of shapes that we're going to be dealing with. So if we have the target bullseye, we're going to be more in the geometric category, and the others that we were looking at just now were going to fall more in the organic. The geometrics are the precise ones, the circles, the squares, the triangles. They're associated with order, stability, efficiency, organization. The organic, however, is going to be a little bit more playful or fun and friendly. It's going to be irregular. It's going to feel more freeform. So we have one that's really rigid. We have one that's a little bit more freestyle. And when we talk about design, you're often going to hear static versus dynamic. And we could talk about shapes in this way also. We have something that's a little bit more static, and then we have something that's a little bit more organic, and it's going to depend on what it is you're trying to convey in your message. And, it's not set in stone. This is what's the fun part. You might even do a combo platter. Maybe you're going to use the circle, but then you're going to use that organic outline shape. And this is going to give us a really nice visual tension. This combination is going to give us some balance. If you have that, for in the example that we use, the geometric base with a little bit of organic line and shape work, it's going to soften it a little bit. So if you're a tech brand that wants to feel a little bit more friendly, you might want to go this route. So again, it's going to depend on your client, your brand, and what it is you're trying to communicate. Circles, they're often associated with unity, wholeness, movement, and you're going to see them on brands like Olympics or Spotify. And the rectangular, it's a little bit more solid, a little bit more grounded. So it's going to be, the stability and trust style work. And this is our banks, our tech companies like Microsoft. Triangles, they're dynamic, they're directional, and they're often used to represent progress or innovation. If we were to switch gears to the art world just momentarily, a lot of our Renaissance and classic style compositions are triangular based because the human eye really likes the triangular form. So you're going to see that brought into design and design compositions as well. Shapes also, of course, are a big player in how we use and navigate that negative space. And we're going to talk more about that in just a little bit. So let's just take a look at the FedEx logo. And we're going to talk about this a couple times throughout this course because it's one of those that uses the elements and principles really well to convey their message. Because when you first look at it, it just looks like text. FedEx. Really simple. But when you start spending some time with it, you're going to notice that hidden arrow in the negative space between the E and the X. And this is going to, if you're trying to convey movement and forward pushing momentum or getting your packages, to their location pretty swiftly, that arrow in that negative space is going to be really impactful because it's reinforcing the message that your client is trying to convey to their customers. And the shape just isn't clever. It's reinforcing the brand's message of speed and direction. So how are you going to use shapes? If we were going to use them in our own designs, you can think of these as tools that help us to build hierarchy and meaning within our work. Are you designing a poster? Then you might want to use the shapes to help group information or to draw the viewer's eye. Maybe you have a really busy photograph or image in your background of your poster, but you want that type to stand out. Well, you could put a rectangle down first and then use your type, so it's going to help separate that info out from the sort of jumbled chaos of the background of the poster. And what if it's a logo like our FedEx? How can the shape alone communicate your message without even needing text? What, like the Target bullseye or the Nike swoosh, what is going to represent your client or the client and what it is their brand is trying to convey? Shapes might seem simple, but as we've been seeing, when you use these with intention, they are really powerful tools. They're going to help us to organize, emphasize, and sometimes even tell the whole story of a design. In particular, let's refer back to that FedEx logo. So as you're making something, just ask yourself, what is this shape doing for my design? Is it working? Is it not working? And you want to lean towards the shapes that are going to reinforce whatever you're trying to say for your client. So from shape, we're going to take it into a dimensional realm, and this is going to be our form. So we've covered our flat building blocks of design, lines and shape. What happens when we add a little bit of depth? And this is going to bring us to form. And we're going to take those 2D shapes and we're going to make them feel three-dimensional. And form is going to give us a sense of volume, space, and even a little bit of realism. So in the simplest sense, we're going to take that shape. Our circle is going to become a sphere. Our rectangle is going to become a cube or cylinders. We're taking that flat form and we're turning into a volume-based, depth-based object. And in design, we're going to use form to help create that illusion of a 3D in a flat space to create real physical objects even. So, we can work from it visually. So maybe the sphere on the right is going to be some sort of button on our, UI UX menu, or you might actually be literally using form. So you can recreate something that is flat in Illustrator like a template, print it out, and then turn it in to a form. Maybe it's a cookie packaging or a box for cosmetics. So it could actually be a tangible, real-life, physical object. Just for example on this, product rendering is really great. It's using form to show the depth and the materiality of the object, which in turn is going to help the consumers visualize it. So if you're into rendering in your design work, this is really great. Think of it as like putting a mock-up up of whatever it is you're working on so that the customer sort of has an idea of what they're going to get out of the package itself. If we're working in UI, UX, form can be implied through the shadows and highlights. And this is, seen in material design because this is what's mimicking the real world surfaces to help create a sense of tactility. Like we were just chatting about our UI buttons on a menu. That button, if we want it to feel like you could push down it and it go click, if you have a little bit of form to that, it's going to be a signifier of that. We're going to have this intuitive knowledge that if we push the button and if it makes that click, it's going to have some sort of output. So maybe it's like a submit button or click here for more. The form might help reinforce whatever action it is we're looking to do in that menu. And form is created by light and shadow. And we'll be getting to value later down the line with our elements and principles. But, these lights and shadows, our highlights is going to help give a little bit of volume to our shape so you can help it make it pop off the page or in the screen if we're working just, digitally. And this is really useful in our digital design because we're often working with a flat medium, but we also want to somehow create depth and hierarchy. So this sort of subtle gradation is going to help inform, our hierarchy. What info comes first, second, third, etc. So form is a really useful tool for that. And we just need to think about why form matters in design. And it's not just about making things look cool. It's actually about guiding the viewer and the viewer's attention. So that button we were talking about. The button in the UI might have a drop shadow, so it's going to make it feel like it's clickable. Maybe it's even going to have that noise, click, click, so that ever, we click on it, it has that sort of signifier attached to it. Package design, same thing. We're using form to help it stand out. We want to have a customer come up and interact with it. We want them to pick up the box, spin it around, read the details, because this interaction is going to make the consumer more interested in the product. Even with posters, that sense of depth like the William Tell that we just saw. It's going to make the composition feel a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more interesting to look at. One of the go-tos for this is our friend Apple. Their marketing and ads consistently uses form to showcase what their products look like in a super hyper-realistic way. And these forms just aren't about realism. It's sleek, it's innovative, it's high quality. And it's also guiding the viewer's focus to the product itself so that, back in the day with the iPod commercials, we had the silhouettes, but the iPod itself was super high rendered, so we could almost imagine what it would be like if we had the iPod ourselves. So they're still doing this. So with the iPhones, the iMacs, etc., if you want to look up really good marketing campaigns, I always recommend Apple for this because their renderings are really spot on. But you don't always have to have it be, a realistic rendering. You can use abstract forms also, and this is going to help evoke the mood, or it's also going to help create some sort of visual interest. With our example on the right, we're building up layers of text, so all these flat shapes and lines are going to be overlaid in a way that it's going to imply a form. And then we're going to be able to read it through the layers. So in these layouts, the form can be implied through these overlapping elements, in this case the lines, shapes, colors. You can use, perspective, or in this case typography, to even do this. When you play with the scale, the positioning, the depth of a piece, or whatever element it is that you're working on, you're going to be able to create a design that feels layered and immersive. The key takeaway of all of this, is form's going to help you add a little bit of realism and help reinforce hierarchy within your design. So maybe you're working with 3D software, or if you're using it in the 2D way, form is going to help you create designs that are going to stand out. And again, our goal, to communicate clearly. All right, onwards to space. So we've talked about lines, shapes, and form. Let's just look at something, that takes that all to the next level, space. So space is not just the blank area around the elements. It's a really active component to the composition. It's going to help create, a sense of balance, focus, breathing room, a little bit of air, as I call it, in your design to help your message be communicated effectively. We usually think of it in two ways. We have the positive and the negative. And the positive space, that's where the action's happening. If we're looking at a newspaper and we see the headline would be considered the positive space. That's the type. It's the black ink. But the area around it, the air, that space around that type, is the negative space. This is the gaps, the margins, those areas of emptiness. Think of these as our sort of pause points. So if we are gathering all of our info from the positive, that is our action, and then we need a pause, that is our negative space. And this is the thing, and it's the most important thing. Negative space isn't nothing. It's actually what's going to help make the positive be a little bit more impactful. It's that dance in the negative space that reinforces the positive space in its message. The Rubens vase is a great example of this. So, if we were to just look at the one on the left, We see the vase itself, but if we look at the space around it, we can see the two faces. If you get really into this, you can look into Rubens' vases, the theories and studies. You can also look up optical illusions, because all of these are working with the interactions of positive, negative space, and the research done on this can be really impactful for your design itself. We've already picked on FedEx, but this is a perfect example of the positive and negative spatial interaction. Our positive is the letters, but that negative space of the arrow is really what's making that logo so impactful. We're also seeing it in this design. We have the sort of yin-yang sort of concept with Penguin and Batman. And for this cover, again, we see the positive, but we can flip and we can also see the negative. And it can also as well be on logos, posters, you name it. That interaction between positive and negative is super impactful. So this white space that I'm talking about, befriend the white space. This is also known as the negative space, and it's, again, that air, that unmarked area around and between the elements that are in your design. It may at first seem like it's a little bit of a waste of space, and your clients, chances are going to feel this way. So part of our job may become just educating them why white space is so important. I usually give the comparison. If you're working at a publication and they have a 2-column by 4-inch ad, the client sees that as dollar signs of what they've spent, so they try to jam as much info into that 2x4 space as possible. But less is more typically in that space, because you only have a couple seconds of a glance to catch the attention. And if you can catch the attention and then they read the viewer, the consumer reads that ad, it's going to be more beneficial than having a whole lot of visual clutter. So it's a really critical tool. It's going to help us create balance, focus, and clarity, and organization, because we want it to be easy to read and digest, and to be able to do so in a relatively swift manner. Those white spaces that we're talking about, this is going to allow the elements to breathe. It's going to reduce that visual clutter. And again, it's going to enhance the readability of a design. So don't be afraid if your client wants a lot of info on a tiny ad. Don't be afraid to, give the white spaces good talk. Another one, we're back to Apple just so that we can see it. But this is an older version of their website. And I only put it in here because, you can go and see what they're currently doing, which is relatively similar in a more contemporary stance of it. But just, go check out their websites. They are pros at using that white space, that negative space, because it's going to really be impactful and help highlight their products, which is going to sort of force us into that focal point. We know exactly what it is we're looking at whenever we see this page. Their sites typically feel clean and sophisticated. They're super easy to navigate. And again, it's all thanks to how they handle that negative space. So how are you going to use space in your own designs? You can start by just thinking about hierarchy. And hierarchy is the arrangement of our elements in order of importance, from most important to next important to next important to least important. What do you want the viewer to focus on first? The negative space, in turn, is going to help to direct their attention. And you're also going to want to consider the readability of it. That space around the text and the images is going to help improve the clarity, but it's also going to help reduce the visual fatigue. In the example on the right, we have the really bold Hamilton in the positive, I'll say, style, space. It's what we're used to reading. But the reversed letters here on the right are sort of feeding you into the main here. And reverse type is really impactful also, because it's getting us to flip between the positive and negative, which also in a way is a really useful device to give emphasis to a piece, and in turn to help flow it into the info that you're looking for. So a design with a lot of space, it's going to feel really clean and modern, but a design that's going to feel every inch is going to, feel really chaotic, energetic. It's going to be dynamic, but it can also be overwhelming if you're not careful. So, it's one of those fine lines. Always experiment, but it feels like if it's taking it to the too far, just reel it back just a little bit. Next up is texture. And this is one of those elements that tend to go unnoticed, but it also has one of the bigger impacts, especially in the look and feel of a design. It's referring to that surface quality of a design. And this can be implied, or it could be, actual physical texture. So, experiencing it. So actual implied texture, depending on which you use, it's going to help add depth and interest and a sense of realism that can make your designs a little bit more memorable. In this case for Nicholson, we have the jack just scanned in, the nickel just scanned in, and then these are, if we're scanning it in, it's the realistic texture. We can see the jack, we can see the nickel, and it looks how it should. There's no abstraction in that. But, if it's more of the implied texture in this case, this has a sort of optically illusion feel to it. The implied is going to help create that illusion. It's going to be maybe pattern-based or gradient-based or image-based. For the physical texture, the actual texture, you might hear me refer to it as, with the actual texture, it could just be, maybe you have a business card printed on a heavy cardstock, but you put an embossing and a gloss on it. It's the actual texture of the card. It's the physical product that you've created. And both of these types of textures do play a role in how we perceive and interact with a design. And all of this can be really purposeful. So let's just think about that business card I was just talking about, the physical texture, the raised lettering, the glossy finish. It's going to immediately feel a little bit more premium. We're going to want to hold on to that business card because they, took their time with the aesthetics of the piece. And the physical texture, that actual texture, it's about the tactile experience, and it's going to make the design stand out on a literal hands-on way because you're going to be able to touch it. Visual, and this is what we're going to use mostly when we have, something that's more screen-based versus a product like the business card that we're going to print out. I mean, this might be a grainy overlay in a photo. It could be a halftone pattern. It'd be something happening in the background to create a pattern, some sort of energy and movement within a piece. Even flat designs, just as a heads up, can feel layered and dynamic when visual texture is used effectively. So just keep that in mind whenever you're working. And it's going to also play a pretty big role in branding. A coffee shop, you're going to see this around town. There's going to be a little bit more homey, and you're going to see the wood grains, and it's going to feel warm and rustic. But that grunge style, poster that you just walked by downtown, it's going to have the grittier textures or overlays, and it's going to have a little bit more edgy feel to it. With Jessica Walsh's logo here, this falls into the flexible branding arena, whereas we have the one, I'll call it the standard logo on the left, but when she put different textures on top, it's going to morph it into new aspects of that branding that it may want to represent. With minimalist designs, these subtle textures, maybe it's a gradient, maybe it's a shadow, maybe it's that sort of smudgy, blurred water look on that logo on the right. That's really interesting because it can make the composition a little bit more dynamic, and it's going to help it, feel a little bit less static or sterile. So how can you actually incorporate texture into your designs? And we were talking before about in the shape category, like what if you have, and this is the perfect example for this, an image in the background, but you want that type to pop off on the page, so you make a shape. And then you have our reversed in it. So, what sort of mood is this setting? Do you want it to be warm or approachable? You might want something that's organic with some rough textures. Do you want something that's sleek and modern, smooth, clean textures, or something like a brushed steel is going to feel really good aesthetically for something that's modern? And also, key word here is, think about what your client's needs are. The texture should complement the other elements, the design. It should be reinforcing the message and whatever narrative aspect they're trying to convey. We don't want it to overwhelm or overpower the composition. Next up, the fun one, color. This is the one I think we spend the most time with whenever you are a maker, because it's one of those things that help to really visually define whatever it is we're working on. This is more than decoration. This is the mood, the meaning, the emotion. It's how we're capturing the attention. It's how we're, helping guide the viewer through the page, and it, can even tell a story without a single word, because if we have a stop sign that's red. It's ingrained in us that we know that, red means stop, green means go, yellow means yield. We have the vocabulary built within us, and we're aware of it, and we're bringing this into whatever it is we're looking at or creating. So understanding color isn't just about knowing what looks good. It's also about, knowing what works. And chances are you've seen the color wheel, and this is our basics. We have our primaries, secondaries, and tertiaries, and we're going to go through these just that you have an understanding of what they are, so that if you are doing your analysis and you want to talk about the color, you have some of that info in your vocabulary arsenal. These relationships, though, this is what's forming the foundation of how we use color in design. These are our color harmonies, etc. Just so that we know the basics, though, our primary colors, this is our red, yellow, and blues. These are the foundations for every color that we're going to work with, and these cannot be mixed by any colors. Something that I don't mention in these slides there's the additive process and the subtractive process. Additive, if we think of it, it's like painting on a canvas, and we're putting the colors together, whereas the subtractive, it's more with the on-screen. So one's being optically mixed and one is being physically mixed. So in this case, red, yellow, blue, I'll be talking about these as if we were, using paint in a canvas, so that we can see the basics and the foundation of it. Because these are the colors, again, that we cannot be created by mixing other colors. These are found in nature. And then we can build any color that we want from these. So if you only have enough money for 3 tubes of paint, these are the 3 you're going to buy, because you can have endless options with this. These are really bold, these are direct, and they're going to have strong emotional response. We can think of the Google logo for this. If you go into Google, chances are you're going to see the really bright primaries right off the bat. And when we mix those together, we get our secondaries. This is the orange, green, and purple, also known as violet. And again, this is created by mixing 2 primary colors together. These are going to feel a little more balanced, because, we had really bold primaries, and these are going to mellow them out a little bit. And it's going to help things feel a little bit more harmonious. And then when we mix a primary and a secondary, we're going to get our tertiaries. And we usually name these by the primary first. So it's our yellow-orange, our red-orange, red-violet, blue-violet, blue-green, and yellow-green. These are a little bit more visual depth, a little bit more complex, and it's perfect to be in the more subtle range of your designs. Complementary colors are the colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. These are our colors like blue or orange, or red and green. When we put these together, they're going to create high contrast, and they're going to be really vibrant. These are the strongest contrasts possible, which can be a good thing and can also not be good. So it depends on what message you're trying to convey. I usually say, if you're using, say in this example, 50% red with 50% green on a page, that's probably going to be a little bit overwhelming. It's too vibrant. But say you have 75% red with green and the 25% for the emphasis, that might have a little bit more better balance between the two. One has to sort of take the lead over the other. If we want to take our complements, if we really want that strong contrast, but we want it to be a little bit more relaxed, the split complements is great for that. So we go directly across from each other on the color wheel, but you take a step to the left and the right. So we're taking that vibrancy and we're dulling it just a little bit, because it's going to balance it a bit more, and it's going to make it a lot more harmonious. So we're still going to get that really, strong contrast with intensity, but it's going to be slightly less intense. It's a really nice color scheme to work with. Another one that's great to work with is the triads, because these are evenly spaced on the color wheel. So if you want to sort of have a starting reference point for this, and then, we have our triangle here, bump, 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 then you can just keep stepping it one over from there. Red, blue, and yellow are, our primaries. This is a triad. green, orange, purple, etc. And this is going to be really nice and harmonious. You're going to have a really nice contrast, but you're still going to have it feeling balanced and a nice sense of harmony within your design. Tetrads is next. These are also known as double complements, and if we look at it on our page, it's essentially a rectangle. So if we think of the triad as the triangle, the tetrad is the rectangle. And these are 4 colors arranged into 2 complementary pairs. We have, like, for example, in this case, the red, green, and the blue, orange. This is a really diverse palette. It's really flexible. You have a good contrast with it. But just as a heads up, and we're going to see this with a lot of these, one color should probably take the lead, and the others are going to be used as accents. Our analogous is exactly the same. We're going to want one to have the lead. So analogous are 3 to 4 colors that are side by side on the color wheel. But like in this example, we want the red violet. We want that to have the lead maybe, and these be accents. This scheme is super harmonious and it's really cohesive, so it's great for those designs that you need to feel unified or calming or really natural in their approach. And just think of these, like I said, these are your starting point. You don't have to stick, exclusively to whatever scheme you've chosen. You can just build it out from there. So theory is just the beginning, but it's whenever, you push it to that next level that it becomes more, unique and for whatever your brand is trying to convey. Symbolism, just to talk a little bit about this, and just as a side note, I'm going to take the sort of Western approach to this. Just be aware that wherever you live in the world may have a different meaning attached to the color. So it's going to require a little bit of research according to where you live. But color is going to carry meaning. Like red, it can be passion or urgency, or blue is trust and calm, and green is nature and growth. They're not universal. They are varying by culture and context, but they're also, really powerful tools for shaping how people are going to perceive your design. So let's just take a look at some of these so that you have a basic idea of what they're doing. Red, passion, energy, urgency. It's associated with, let's say, Valentine's Day, love, power, danger. And we can have pros and cons to each of these color symbolisms as a heads up. This is going to be something that's attached to something that has a really strong emotion, or we want it to grab attention. Sales, warnings, or that stop sign that we were just talking about. Blue, it's going to be our trust, our calm, our stability. You're going to see these used by financial institutions. We'll talk about the green aspect of finances in a second. Healthcare brands and tech companies. We want them to be confident. We want them to be dependable. This is the blue that you will choose for that aspect of it. Yellow, happiness, optimism, warmth. This is really attention grabbing. We want it to be cheerful and positive, but if we use too much of it, it might feel a little bit overwhelming. So sort of like what we were saying before, all things with a grain of salt. If it's too busy, dial it back. If it's too yellow, dial it back. Green, this is growth, nature, harmony. And, we can have some finances with this. This is finances in the sense that, we want wealth and growing our money rather than, the blue where it's going to be stable and we're going to keep it safe. This is our eco-friendly initiatives. This is also our health, wealth, a sense of balance and renewal. Orange. We have the energy of red, we have the cheerfulness of yellow, and we bring it all together with orange. We have this symbolizing enthusiasm, creativity, and friendliness. This is often used in designs that are targeting for younger, more dynamic audiences. Purple is our luxury color. This is luxury, creativity, and mystery. You can dig a little bit deeper into this. You've probably read about it in your history books with the Phoenicians and how purple was developed back in the day just for royalty. And all of that history has continued up the timeline, and we still think of it as something that's luxurious. This is our premium brands, the more imaginative brands, something that you want to convey a sense of sophistication or uniqueness. I'm going to call these the non-color colors. If you take, say, any studio art class, you're going to get the non-color talk. But these also are really impactful in design, so I wanted to toss them in. And this is our neutrals, our grays, our browns. These are really stark. They're not trying to sway you, and they're not trying to provoke or evoke much feeling from you. And same thing with black and white. We're just, that contrast. Neutrals on a stronger contrast, basically, but we're trying to be more like the support system rather than the shining star. So let's just look at colors from the design perspective now. So let's just look at fast foods. Chances are you're going to see a lot of reds and yellow because we want it to grab attention. We want to be, you're hungry, hurry through the drive-through, get your food, yum, yum, yum. It's really exciting, and it's, an experience. So you're going to see this a lot in the fast food chains, although I'm sure you've seen some discussions where the brands are now rebranding themselves to be more into the neutrals. That'll probably be a study for later down the line as to why they're doing that. But we take that in contrast, the energy, the fastness of the fast food chains, and what happens if you want it like Chase, where you want to be stable and you want to convey trust. We're going to use that blue then, because these choices aren't random; they're intentional as to how we respond to color. If we had Chase in red and yellow, our connection to it would be entirely different than what we're seeing here. And would we want our financial systems to be fast food colors? Probably not. Also, as we know, brands are going to use colors as a key part of their identity. We have Spotify green, we have Coca-Cola red, and our Tiffany blue. Chances are, if someone to say, Tiffany blue, you would have that image of the Tiffany blue pop up into your head. It's instantly recognizable as air quote theirs. These colors just don't stand out. They're what the brand is actually about. Whenever you do brand identity, if this is something you get into, one of the first things you'll be working on is, developing a color structure system for your brand and its identity. So how are you going to use color in your own designs? So you just think about what is the message that you're trying to convey. What do you want them to feel? To choose the colors that are going to align with that emotion. Then you're going to consider the contrast and hierarchy. The color can highlight the key elements, like our calls to action, our paragraphs that need to jump out from that photo background. This may also in turn help create a balance and flow in your composition. Attached to color is also value, and we can view value as the black, white, grayscale, but we can also view it with colors, different values of colors. And this is really nice because it's an essential but subtle tool to help us create that depth, hierarchy, and focus. Value is referring to the lightness or darkness of a color, and it's going to range from the purest of white to the deepest of black, and every color in the spectrum in between. So it's what gives a design contrast, and it's also going to help the elements stand out or recede accordingly. And it does a lot of heavy lifting in our design. It's going to help us determine the readability. It's going to help us create a sense of depth. And it's also going to help us guide the viewer's eye through the composition so that they know, what's the most important info and so on. So even if your design is totally black and white, that value alone is going to help create that drama, clarity, and visual interest that you are looking for in your piece. So let's just start with the grayscale. James Victori's grayscale, he typically draws on top of some sort of photo and puts his message on top of it. So the grayscale, this neutral that we're talking about from our last section, without that color, the changes in the value are going to, create that illusion of form, texture, and focus. And when he's using the really, solid tone of the dark black against that grayscale, it's going to help create that, jump out attention. We know exactly where to read. He's creating hierarchy through his use of value. It's going to help it define its shapes. It's going to emphasize contrast, and also it's going to help us add dimension to the piece. So if it wasn't totally grayscale like we just saw with James Victory, what happens if you use it with a stronger contrast? So contrast with our values is just the difference between the elements, lights, and darks. We have high contrast and we have low contrast. The one on the left is our high contrast, and High contrast is going to grab attention. So think about this as like a bold headline against a white background, or in this case, black background with white text. We could have something that's more low contrast, so the red, smaller type, sort of sandwiched between the hands. It's going to be a little bit more subtle and calm, but it also might be a little bit hard to read if it's not done right. And if you're into UI, UX, it's really key here also. I think that for value, the thing we think of first and right off the bat is light mode versus dark mode. But the balance of values are going to ensure that the text is readable, that the buttons stand out, and that the overall experience is really intuitive for the user. If you have too little contrast, your design might feel a little bit too flat, a little bit too much, and it might overwhelm the viewer from one side to the other. So if too little, too much, both are going to impact the user and the user experience. And this is just that colors within values so that we could see that also. So how exactly do you use value effectively in design? Think about your focal points. The elements that you want to emphasize should have the highest contrast against their background. Then you're going to consider the depth. Maybe this is our gradients. Maybe this is our shadows. Can this help add dimension to your piece if that's what you're looking for? And also you could balance your light and dark areas, and this is going to help to create a unified and more harmonious composition, which does tend to be key. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the principles of design.